Hello and welcome to the video. I'm back here with my friend Max, Wizard of Poker, here to analyze the Mystery Bounty Day 2 that, spoiler alert, I went on to win. We're down to, I think, the last two tables now. Ready to review some more hands, Max?
I am. Wizards high praise. Not sure I live up to it, but I'll do my best.
You can see there's 15 people left, 448 entries. At this point, like we spoke about in the last part, the big bounties have been won, so the bounties are still there, but they're not as influential on the strategy. We're not going to be making huge hero calls now to try to win bounties because the pay jumps are going to be more significant. Blinds 10k, 25k.
And we
And
have a
so
decision, yeah.
he's open jammed just under 19 bigs.
I don't think we should have any shoves here, in theory. Final two tables. If you were going to have some, or I say I don't think we should have any. I don't think we should have many.
Yeah.
If you were going to have some, I think the hands like the weaker suited broadways. I wouldn't mind
Jack
a
10
Jack 10
suited.
suited. Yeah, exactly. Something like that can get the button might even fold an ace 10 off, or definitely fold a king jack off. You know, some dominated combinations. You're going to get called by ace king, ace queen, pocket eights, pocket nines. This one, king jack. You will get king queen off to fold, but I think the hand just plays really nicely as a raise fold. The big blind yourself, especially covering, is going to defend really wide. Shukri here can get, a king or jack high flop and stack your inferior top pairs. But also, when he gets the money in and is called here, he's going to mostly be crushed. And I think that people sometimes underestimate how much 19 blinds is here. Like, you have a lot of movement, a lot of room here. Yeah, I definitely think this is a bit too aggressive, and I'd like to see a raise fold. In terms of your decision, it's tough, right? Because when there shouldn't be much shoving, as I said here, I think that we then have to assign a range, especially, I don't know who this player is. I'm going to assume they're a recreational.
I can give
If
you
they are,
some information on
okay,
this player that I already knew
okay.
about. They raise, they get free bet, they four bet to, I think it was like 30% of the effective stack. The player five bet jams, sorry, so he's getting better than 2-to-1 price. He then folds kings.
Wow, four bet folded kings. Okay.
Maybe it
Yeah,
was a free
something
bet fold. It might have been a free, but it was basically like a very good price where I didn't think based on the action he took he could get away from kings, but he did get away from kings. So this is the sort of player I'm against in this spot, and I know about this king's fold in this hand.
So, just out of interest, was it a good fold? Results wise?
Not this time. The woman had pocket jacks. She definitely abused her old woman character profile.
Anyway,
Yeah.
aside from that, given that's the case, I don't know how much we can read into that. But what I would probably say, as I just said, assuming that there's a likelihood they're recreational, believing that, in my opinion, particularly in ICM, we don't want a bunch of shoves here. We want to assign a, what makes sense kind of range here. And the first hands that pop into my head as a kind of what makes sense range for jamming here are going to be small middling pairs that are seen as not good enough to raise call, and that perhaps our opponent doesn't want to go post flop with. So a lot of like fours through pocket eights, I would have given them, I think. And then a bunch of, I guess, suited aces and broadways, and some of the stronger offsuit ace X. So I could definitely see hands like ace 10 and ace jack off here. And I've even seen people shove ace queen off in this situation. I wouldn't give them ace king, and I wouldn't give them the suited ace jack, for example, but I definitely see ace 10 off, ace jack off, king queen off, king 10 suited. So that kind of range. You're not going to see a 7-6 suited. You're probably not going to see an ace deuce off. But I think you're going to see lots of two big cards and small middling pairs. By the way, I think there'll be some ace 5 suited type stuff in there as well. But given all that information and the range I would assign, I would just be quite comfortably folding the ace 9, I think, without prior information. I'd need to know they're very capable. It's still a third of your stack. If you call and lose here, your ability to apply pressure is going to go down. You look like you're the chip daddy on the table or close to. I just think it's a spot we really don't want the variance. And it might look like a tight fold, but I would just be, I think, pretty much pure folding without some serious information.
I think that's where my head was at too. I would call, I think, up to 15 blinds pretty comfortably, thinking that I just dominate a lot more of the range. I've got a lot more equity versus the range. There's the bounty element too, even though it's not so important. But 19 felt like a little bit of a bridge too far. If this was online and I'm against certain types of players, then I could see myself calling. But for the live poker environment, when, yeah, I've got this really nice stack and I don't want to kind of give that up when I'm comfortable chip leader at the table, I believe, I don't think I want to take the variance of the spot. If the big bounties were in, I think that completely changes it and it could well be a snap call. But I don't think the bounties are so important. I just want to show you one thing about trying to make this decision a little bit different. So as soon as Lauren folds here in seat 3, it's on him. Just look at the speed he makes his decision. He verbalized it before he put it in, but I'd say it was like less than 5 seconds before he went all in there. So it's harder for me to imagine he has a spot with like I don't know, even an ace two suited. I can't imagine being in there when he jams that quickly. Obviously, can't rule it out for sure, but you just got to work with the information you've got. I think I did like gruel over this decision a little bit because obviously if it was for less chips, I would have called, and it still is quite close. And as you can see, I have the best hand, and in a bounty, obviously if he turns his hand face up, then I call. But we're just working against the range. I think, like Max said, ace jack, ace ten, offsuit hands could be a big portion of the range, and that's the 12 combos each of hands that crush me. If it's a pair, obviously I'm not doing that great. I've got like 45% maybe against pairs.
I think
Well,
also it's easy with cards up here, guys, to say, well, he's obviously going to have lots of this kind of holding. It's not just about, with the ICM, is it a call? Is it not? When we're not at risk, often obviously people talk about, right, for your tournament life in ICM, we need to be tighter because obviously our risk premium is different. But it's not just about that. If we look here, and this is the perfect time to say this actually, you can see the way the stacks are distributed. Well, if you are to call and lose here, Brandon, you're now going to be covered by Laurent. You're going to now be in the bottom half of the chip stacks on the table, which is going to affect your ability to win chips in every pot from now on. And obviously, if you win this pot, excellent, but it's not like you're now a runaway chip leader, right?
yeah, I agree. I just want to hold this position. It's a good position.
That's a lot of, I think, what the ICM game is, right? You want to win small pots as a chip leader. You don't want to be in big pots unless you've kind of got a good hand, really. I know that might sound counterintuitive to some people, but just because you cover and can put the pressure on, we're happy to, I think, just serve volley and try and slowly, comfortably chip up. We don't want clashes particularly unless we have very strong holdings. Then make a standard open and we have another spot here.
So yeah, this is an interesting spot. I think I wouldn't be surprised if a solver takes some jams with this hand in this spot up to maybe 30 bigs. I think over 30, it's probably not going to be a thing anymore. But at that 25 to 30 big blind spot, it might be the perfect hand that gets king queen offsuit to fold and ace nine offsuit to fold. And as soon as that becomes true, it becomes pretty powerful to jam. And obviously, you get called by pocket eights, you get called by ace queen, and like you're doing well against some of the hands that call. Ace jack suited is supposed to call, but live poker environment, same principle as usual. Do we really want to take the variance of that? I've also got Ron in the big blind here, who is he's going after it. I think he's liable to play really big pots. I mean, that's going to work against me and for me. If I want to call here and Ron's going to squeeze a lot, that's obviously bad for this hand, but I just dominate a lot. I think I definitely don't want to fold this hand. It's just, do I want to free bet, fold to an all in? Do I want to flat, or do I want to jam? And I think jam's clearly too big with Ron's stack and they're playing over 30 big. So it's just, do I call or do I free bet, fold?
I 100% agree. We're definitely not folding this. I would also agree if we were playing something like 30 effective, especially covering, it's a very useful jam, gets a lot of dominated offsuit hands to fold. You may even get king jack suited, king queen suited in a live environment to fold for 30 blinds. But, as we say, Ron obviously has a bunch and he has more like 35 here, Lynn, 37. So I definitely don't want to shove. I think that, I can't see 3-bet being bad particularly. However, I'd have a preference for slightly weaker suited king eight. A, do worse in the call line, and B, get more dominated offsuit to fold. So let's say we have king 5, king 6, king 7 suited. We can then he can probably open king 8 and king 9 off here, and definitely king 9. So we can get those ones to fold, in addition to the fact that he's probably going to open king 5 suited. So king 9 suited dominates some of his opens. He'll open probably queen and jack 9 off. King 9 suited obviously is more of a quote unquote waste to 3-bet fold and just picks more EV in the call line. So I don't think it would be like a horror show to 3-bet, but I'd personally choose slightly more weak suited king X, or perhaps a hand like king 10 off that just has less realization and less EV and doesn't want to go 3-way as much. So yeah, I would pick a hand like I say, king 10 off, maybe king jack off, and if we're going to pick a suited one, like a king 6, king 7 would be much more favorable.
It's nice not to interact with your opponent's raise fold gap, and a lot of the times the cards that your opponent will raise fold are the offsuit cards between an 8 and a king. So for example here, king 9 offsuit is going to be a raise fold from the button, king 8 offsuit as you pointed out, or a hand like jack 9 off, jack 10 offsuit I think has to fold here versus the 3-bet in ICM. Some more offsuit broadways and some weaker suited hands maybe, like a jack 7 suited. So not interacting with those sort of hands is often a good way to find your 3-bets. So king 5 suited probably won't interact with quite as many raise folds, so you're going to win pre more, fold out more domination as Max says. That's just going to work nicely for the hand. King 5 suited folding out king 9 offsuit, king 8 offsuit, king 9 suited, not wanting to fold those hands. I'd like to see myself call here. I don't remember what I did in game.
Another point, guys, we'll reiterate this probably throughout this series. In a live environment, we're probably going to make even more EV in the call line than we're quote unquote supposed to. People misunderstanding perhaps some of the dynamics, maybe not putting us under as much pressure as they could. We get more equity realization typically because of a general population passivity. So if you're between two options, often it'll be fine to just take the passive one pre-flop and not bloat pots up in a heavy ICM environment.
I check bets pretty small, like quarter pot. standard check call, would you say, with the king nine here, or even multi-way?
Yeah, I don't even think we probably play raises here in ICM very much at all. Our flushes are pretty locked down anyway, even the smaller ones. We don't have pocket jacks. We don't have pocket nines, so our only set is 5. We maybe have jack 9 suited, that's the only 2 pairs. So it's a board we kind of have a lot of 1 pair and a lot of flushes and then a lot of pair. So yeah, I don't think we want to play much of a check raise range, particularly with the big blind behind us. And this hand fits perfectly into a call.
An interesting spot to lead the flop, maybe. Being in the sandwich, covering both players, having a lot of suited hands in my range. The board is kind of middling, which does suit my calling range. There are definitely hands that I think would benefit from a lead, but don't really want to check call or check raise. A hand like 7-8 suited comes to mind. It's a strong kind of straight draw, but check call out of position doesn't feel great. Check raise is not really viable on a flush board. I think as soon as there's some bluffs that like it, then obviously if I have just maybe ace jack myself, which might play this way, or some 2 pairs, some flushes, I think taking the aggression with those might make some sense. I'm not 100% sure that that's going to be a viable thing in solver world, but often when you're in the sandwich, there's a middling board. That is something that is valid. And when I cover people in ICM, I do have more license to use tools like that. But Ron in the big blind is the wild card, obviously, and leading into him, if he's going to play loads of raises, that's not going to be great. And I don't exactly have a flush advantage because the button still has all the nut flushes. It has like ace king and ace queen of clubs that I don't, king queen of clubs that I probably don't. So I'm not 100% sure how viable that is, but I think it's just worth thinking about. At least it could be an exploit, even if it's not solver approved to have leads there in the small blind. Just on the flop, that is, not on the time.
My initial guesstimate would be not on a monotone board. I actually think Jack 9-5 dual or rainbow is probably reasonable. As you say, a lot of the density of your range is going to be, between 8 and queen, right? Just a bunch of hands like this. You're going to have a pair or a straight draw on this text or a bunch. But I think that on the monotone board where, the nuts is pretty locked down, and like I say, we don't really have improvability because we don't have the sets, I don't think we're probably going to want to start leading too much out of position. I think the button with the range advantage and nut advantage and future nut advantage, right, with the likelihood that he's going to have much more naked ace of clubs and ability to make a full house. I think
Yeah.
probably out of position is probably a bit of a no-no in theory, like you say, but it's possible that there could be good exploitative reasons. But I think in general, I just avoid, like I say, on a monotone board where the nuts are pretty locked down at this point.
Yeah, I can't have pocket jacks. Maybe I can have pocket nines sometimes. Pocket fives, yeah, I guess I can have that. It's a good way to determine how good your range is doing on a board. Look at all the nutted hands, in this case, obviously, flushes and sets. They're going to drive the strategy. But one question I do like to ask myself if I'm thinking about leading a spot is, does the button want to check back this spot a lot? And as soon as that becomes true, and because obviously multi-way is very complicated, we don't have a perfect answer, especially at ICM, bounty, etc. I think the button is incentivized to check back this board a lot, even with a jack, even with a hand like ace jack, no club. You could argue for not pure betting a hand like this. Queens with no club here isn't exactly thrilled to play for stack. Even queens with a club, if the clubs brick out, you're not going to be loving life if stacks go in. As soon as that becomes a thing, I think there is more license to have leads. I'm not saying that this is a spot where it's appropriate, because you're right, monotone is quite different, but it is just worth thinking about it. If it's a bad situation for the aggressor, that's kind of your license to maybe have some leads in there sometimes. I think the big blind could potentially have some leads in here too, because he's going to have the most flushes. But if you're a lot deeper here, then probably not, because the button's going to have the most nuts. Again, I'm going to leave that to the solver wizards to actually give me the right answer to this spot. But it'd be interesting to see if anyone can solve a freeway ICM crazy spot like this. It's just worth thinking about.
This is obviously another one of your strengths, in my opinion. Just to think outside of the box, yeah, that can be important. Not to just look at a board and just instantly check. Take a few seconds, maybe have a think about how the ranges are constructed. And like I say, I absolutely agree with you. On Jack 9-5 rainbow or two tone, I think it's actually very reasonable, and it may even be reasonable here. So yeah, I like that. We're not just right, guys. Quick check onto the next street of the hand. Let's have a think about each decision, especially in these unique spots.
Yeah, it's always worth thinking in spot, especially the spots where we're furthest behind with solvers. Like multi-way is probably one of the situations we're furthest behind with, because those solvers take so much computing power, they're a lot harder to find, and there's so many variables that you need to get right. And obviously here with bounty and ICM, it's ridiculous how many variables are at play here. It's always worth just going with your intuition in game, and it's fine to make mistakes. If I led this board and then we look at a solve and it's never a thing, and I'm going to get exploited because maybe he just always raises every hand on the button. Obviously, we're only playing in this moment. You can only go on, how do I think these players will respond with their range? And that's basically what poker is. It's figuring things out on the fly and exploiting your opponents based on their tendencies. How would you respond to the turn? He's barreled small again. Let's see what percentage of the pot that is. He's gone like 40% by the looks of it.
We have the luxury of seeing the hands, and it looks very much now like he's betting what he thinks his hand is worth, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I would be fairly sure he sizes up bigger with a really strong hand, just to put more money in the pot and threaten his whole stack. We don't have obviously the benefit of knowing that at the time. I think personally, what I would probably have believed in game, and I'm interested if you recall what you thought, I probably would have given him less bluffs for this sizing, I think, than usual, perhaps, or than perhaps a balanced range, purely because it doesn't really look like this size is threatening many of your pairs or draws, right? You're not under pressure. I probably would have given him more of like a linear value range. So maybe taking away some of his absolute best hands or a lot of the best hands, but then not giving him as many bluffs. So I think it's very easy to say this, and I don't want this to just be obvious because I can see his hand, but I think him having like an overpair or a strong jack here makes a lot of sense. Or maybe a very strong draw like king queen or ace queen with a club. I don't think he's going to just have a random ace four of spades for this size, 7-6 of hearts.
I do think sometimes people will use a smaller size in the spot when they've got super snug value. For example, like a nut flush here might size down because if I fold a jack, well, that's a hand that was drawing dead. That's the last thing we want. Or a hand like I've got, the nut flush really just wants me to improve to trips or two pair or just not get away. Or if I did even have pocket six with a club, if you size up the turn, then that hand is already starting to fold if you go more than half pot. Just making sure that I always get to the river with hands that are drawing dead, I think is really good for some super strong hands, especially the nut flush. Yeah, maybe a set as well, interacting with top pair, or a hand like this, which is like strong, but it's not living the dream exactly. So like a good top pair or an overpair without the backup. That's the sort of range I was thinking too. And if it is a bluff, it's more than likely going to be a follow through bluff, right? Like an ace of clubs for might do this sort of size to put it in the box of I could have the nut flush, but then that's a hand that's always going to bet the river. Or at least I can't imagine anyone would play bet giver with a flush draw blocker on this board.
I said you're taking lots of the strong hands away, but I think what I meant to say was other than the lockdown super nuts. I agree, actually.
Yeah.
The super duper nuts never want you to debate folding like pair and flush draw or something, exactly like you say, that's dead. 8-7 of clubs, in my opinion, puts more money in. Jack 9, jacks, nines put more money in. A vulnerable flush or something puts more money in. But I agree. He can probably have the super duper nuts, and then he can have lots of linear value. And I just personally think it's under bluff sizing. So given all that, and I think you will find a fold. I think I'd find a fold. You never improve other than on a king or a nine. They have to then not be a club. And even then, if the river's a nine or a king and he like puts it all in, it's not exactly like we're ecstatic. It's one of those spots where a hand like sevens with a club, way better of a continue. A hand like king queen with a club, way better of a continue, although the absolute strength is obviously weaker. This is the kind of hand, in my opinion, is just a very easy chuck it into the muck, move on to the next hand.
Do I agree in game? We haven't even got time banks yet. I didn't even notice that.
I think you find the fold. He does. Good fold. Again, it's nice to keep seeing the chip counts because, again, 57 bigs there. 5 are being threatened immediately, right? Then you may be going to face a bet on the river. And you can just see that. I know I'm going to say this a lot probably through this video. We drop below another player in Vitali. Link catches us up that bit more. It just gets much more sandwiched. And our position is really good at the moment. We want to maintain the stat quo, and that's a lot of what you want to do deep in the tournament.
If you are thinking about calling the turn lighter, like if I'm looking at my range as a whole here, I know we did speak about king queen offsuit with a club, much better call. You want to have a hand that can either improve against value or can be good already. So in this case, I don't beat any of his value. His value is starting with a jack, at least in my, maybe ace nine, who knows? Ace nine with the ace clubs, maybe that's the bottom, but I think it's probably a jack. It's probably jack 10, queen jack, king jack, one of those hands as well as value. So if I call, I want a lot of leeway to be able to improve against a hand like that. Or I want to be able to beat it already. So if I have ace jack here, well, maybe yes, king jack, queen jack, so I can't get away from that hand yet. But if I have like jack 8 suited here, maybe there's an argument for just folding because it's kind of similar to the hand I've got, right? You can't really go anywhere, and his bluffs are probably going to get me to fold the river or improve sometimes. You're just better off having a hand that's clearly into one box. Either I beat value or I have lots of ways to improve against the value. And obviously king 9 doesn't do any wonders for either of those. Like a king or a 9 might not even be good.